Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, October 6th, 2015, getting into the week here. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone handset, ready to swoop on down and grab it when you call on in, put you on the air with your comments and questions. All right, obviously, starting off, Syria continues to be a major flashpoint. You've probably noticed there isn't as much coverage about Syria in the American corporate media as there was before Russia's coming to Syria's aid against all these terrorist groups, because it's turned into a big propaganda disaster. But there is a propaganda campaign beginning to mount. We're going to be talking about that. But getting to the situation on the ground, it looks like my prognostication that Russia is just going to blitzkrieg this and get rid of all these terrorists, U.S. supported and otherwise, as quickly as possible. First of all, to demonstrate they can do it and make the U.S. look impotent for having been after ISIS and Al-Qaeda supposedly for months on end without accomplishing anything at all. And basically just establish a new reality on the ground. And the U.S. is just in the U.S. government is in an absolute fury because this is contradictory to their ongoing policy of conquering all of the oil-producing Middle Eastern nations and bringing them back under the U.S. dollar, which is what they're trying to do. We are continuing to see reports. This one's actually in the Express in Great Britain. ISIS has been so weakened by the Russian airstrikes and by desertions that are going on, it could collapse at any moment. It is questionable whether it is even functioning as a cohesive unit any longer, as opposed to just the remnants, the ragtag remnants of this whole hoax dashing around the countryside trying to figure out what they're going to do. Now, Russia has provided drone footage showing that ISIS are now sheltering in the mosques and hiding their weapons and other supplies around the mosques. And Russia is reasserting that because mosques are civilian structures, they are not going to attack them or bomb them, which ISIS knows. However, Igor Konashekov, spokesman for the Russian Defense Ministry, held out the possibility that ISIS may blow up the mosques in order to put the blame on Russia. And we know ISIS has been running around that part of the world blowing up all these Roman arches and antiquities. So it's not like they would hesitate to blow up a mosque or shoot down a Malaysian Airlines passenger jet to blame on the bad guys. This is just kind of what they do. Now, I'm seeing an alarming trend in the propaganda, and it's typified by this article that came out of the Wall Street Journal. U.S. sees Russian drive against CIA-backed rebels in Syria. And I've seen several headlines around, including one earlier today where it said, you know, we might as well face up to it. Russia has attacked the United States because they're attacking our supported allies inside Syria, and therefore, you know, Russia's declared war on the United States. And, of course, Russia's done no such thing. Syria asked Russia to come in to deal with the terrorist threat. Russia said yes. And Russia is under no obligation to differentiate between terrorists that are being backed and supported by the Central Intelligence Agency or any other kind. And frankly, it looks like most, if not all of them, are being supported by the United States. But that's the new spin. If Russia is invited into Syria and attacks the U.S.-sponsored forces trying to overthrow the government of Syria, it represents an attack by Russia against the United States of America. Now, the other day, I made that comment about how would you, living in the United States of America, feel if you found out the government of Mexico was giving guns and cash to street gangs in the United States to kick up problems, destabilize the country, and drive the government from office in order to replace it with a pro-Mexico junta, because that's what's going on in Syria right now. And I'm not the only one who was thinking about that. Over at SOT.net, they had a satirical article about how Germany is going to supply arms and cash and supply to the Ferguson rebels in the United States because this police abuse of the American people has crossed a red line. The world cannot sit idle while the American police forces murder so many innocent Americans, 8 times more than the terrorists do. The time has come to act, and we're going to go in and do that. Now, the U.S. is still trying to sell the idea that they have some kind of a right to intervene in Syria because supposedly Bashar al-Assad used poison gas against his own people. Now, that has never actually been proven. We're just supposed to take it on faith from the same government that told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. But I'd like you all to sort of set the Wayback Machine to April 19th, 1993, when the U.S. government used a chemical weapon that's banned for use against enemy troops in warfare against a church full of women and children in Waco, Texas. Now, does that give France the right to start invading our country? No, of course it doesn't. The United States government is in the wrong here. The United States government has been in the wrong in all these interventions because they're not intervening for humanitarian reasons. Because if you look at the quality of life for the people of all of these countries before and after the U.S. intervention, it always goes downhill. The humanitarian crisis gets worse, not better. They're not bringing democracy to all these countries. In all of the foreign interventions the U.S. has done claiming we're bringing democracy to those people, they never get it. They get a U.S.-installed dictator, like the Shah of Iran, or Pinochet, or Ferdinand Marcos, or Batista, and on and on and on. Now, the U.S. is accusing Russia of a ground invasion into Syria. Now, there are 2 problems with that. First of all, because the government of Syria has asked Russia to come in, it doesn't really qualify as an invasion, does it? They're trying to use that word because it's loaded. Oh, Russia's invading Syria. No, Russia was invited in. Second, Russia is saying they're not planning a ground campaign. They don't need to. Because their air campaign against all of these terrorist groups, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, all of these CIA groups, is proving to be very, very effective. Remember, most of these people are mercenaries. They're not going to die for the cause. They're heading for the border. They're pouring into Jordan right now. Or Turkey. They're getting out of town. They want to be able to spend all that money they were paid to overthrow Syria. Now, yesterday, the Russian Air Force announced they destroyed 20 ISIS tanks near the town of Palmyra. The U.S. immediately turned around and accused Russia of bombing civilian targets in Palmyra. Oh, it's a horrible crime when you bomb civilian targets. Unless it's that hospital up in Afghanistan, then it's collateral damage. And Obama actually said that. Hospital, terrible, collateral damage. You shouldn't feel concerned about it. It's not a war crime. It was an accident. We didn't really mean to bomb the hospital. When the hypocrisy and the double standard is this overtly on display, everybody picks up on it. Now, Russia is currently running airdrops over the areas still held by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and everybody else who's trying to give Assad the heave-ho. They're dropping leaflets saying, don't make it worse for yourselves. You've seen what we're doing. Now's the time to get out because we're coming to get you. And apparently, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all these other rebels are reading those pamphlets, and they are skedaddling. Huge influx across these various borders. Now, Obama has gone on and authorized the resupply of the Syrian opposition. He's going to spend your tax dollars sending more weapons into an illegal war the U.S. is carrying out inside Syria, and it is illegal. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I think we all need to understand right now we are in the most serious confrontation since the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're seeing this game of brinksmanship between Russia and the United States, and the United States is raising on a busted flush because international law and the United Nations Charter are not supporting their position. The U.S. is maintaining the position that the United States, as master of the world, has a right to go anywhere and do whatever they want. Last time I heard that attitude was coming from that short little guy in Germany with the Charlie Chaplin mustache, and it didn't work out all that well back then. We are getting a report from There Are No Sunglasses, WordPress.com. There is a steady stream of cargo-laden Russian warships coming south through the Bosphorus into the eastern Mediterranean. They're being joined by the Chinese warships that are coming in, and of course the U.S. is deploying all of their forces into the area. All of them are saying it's just naval exercises. But they're putting their assets into position for what could be a major, major escalation. Meanwhile, Russia has deployed 64 of their S-300 ship-to-air missiles off the coast of Syria. These are serious, serious air defense weapons. Probably doing it in response to those 4 Israeli F-15s that tried to sneak into Syria over Latakia the other day. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski has come out of his closet he's been hiding in all this time, saying that the U.S. should retaliate if Russia doesn't stop attacking U.S. assets. See, this is more of that spin. This has nothing to do with Syria. Russia's attacking U.S. assets. And Brzezinski said, we should retaliate. Well, here's your rifle, Zbigniew. And Zbigniew does not seem to understand that his statement is only reinforcing to the rest of the world the impression that all of these so-called rebels in Syria are working for the United States government to get Bashar al-Assad out of power. And maybe the U.S. government just doesn't care anymore if the cover story is completely blown. They're standing up there and saying, yeah, you're right, this is all about Assad and everything else was a lie, but if you're a loyal American, you will help us conquer all these other countries and enslave them to the U.S. dollar. And by the way, you need to look at something. There's a U.S. law, the Neutrality Act of 1794, still in effect, makes it illegal for an American to wage war against any country that is officially at peace with the United States. Sounds to me like we have a lot of people who are in violation of that law. Of course, it's only a misdemeanor. But it's another reminder that the U.S. government is unconcerned about the letter of the law. Whether it's U.S. law or international law or the UN Charter, they just want what they want and think that that constitutes a force of nature. Now, over in thefiscaltimes.com, they have an article pointing out that Obama's Syria strategy has fallen apart. The White House is scrambling. They're desperate, trying to regain the propaganda initiative, if not the actual military initiative. And Putin is now calling the shots in Syria. And again, Syria asked Putin to help. Syria has not asked the U.S. to intervene. And absent a resolution from the United Nations, interventions by the United States of America into anybody's country that has not attacked us is a violation of international law. It's a violation of the UN Charter. It is an act of war. The U.S. is the aggressor. Meanwhile, Obama's out there whining about, what a surprise it is that people have more respect and regard for Putin than for him because he's the President of the United States of America. How can you admire Putin more than me? He's outclassed you, Barry. That's what's going on here. All right, we're going to grab ourselves some phone calls. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I was reading through your website today, and I'd just taken a sip of coffee when I read that the Afghan government had asked Russia to go in to protect them.
You're spoiling the surprise. You're spoiling my surprise for my readers. But yes, now the government of Afghanistan wants Russia to come in and help get rid of all their enemy elements.
Well, and you nearly choked me, I mean, it could have been serious. But anyway, I'm just wondering when Cuba and Venezuela are going to ask the Russians to go in to protect them.
It's a trend. It's a growing trend.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. The dropping of this leaflet, I'd heard about this a couple of days ago, but I didn't mention it because I thought, maybe, maybe not. But apparently they're taking advantage of this huge success they've had with these initial 60, 70 raids on ISIS and the other terrorists. And of course, they're on the run, as that lady in Turkey told me a few days ago. You know, the trickle now really is a flood.
Well, you know, there's the hardcore of the hired mercenaries, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they bolster their ranks with disaffected people that they bring on in, and they give them money and guns and say, have fun. But most of these people aren't committed to the cause. They're there for the money, or they're there just to have a little vacation and shoot some holes in something. And as soon as they're actually being shot at, they're leaving. They're absolutely deserting. And if you've ever read Sun Tzu's Art of War, and he talks about the essential elements for victory, and the loyalty and discipline of your troops is a key factor, and ISIS doesn't have it.
Yeah, I mean, the way everything is happening, you know, the reaction of the Pentagon, the reaction of the government, the president, and so forth, it looks to me like the U.S. military is made up of soft chocolate soldiers. Well,
no, the U.S. military is basically worn out from 12 years of war. The stockpiles are drawn down. The existing weapons are worn out. The new weapons coming online are hideously expensive, and they don't work. I don't know if you were listening to the show yesterday. They've just discovered the F-35 ejection seat is actually going to break the necks of the pilots who have to punch out. And so they're hamstrung. Now, the individual members of the U.S. military are going to do their job, but on the other hand, they know the moral law is not on their side, and that is another one of the key factors that you have to have for victory, according to Sun Tzu. And so, but the real issue is Russia in Syria is a huge political embarrassment because it's ripped the lid off this hoax of ISIS and Al-Qaeda as the cover story for the U.S. continued aggression against Syria. And now the U.S. is having to admit it. Yeah, we're after Assad. The ISIS and Al-Qaeda is a side issue, and so forth. Anyway, John, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead right to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, those leaflets drop is a way for Russia to see assets moving around, just like they gave the hour notice. Yeah. They can have drones in the area, so they can follow where things are being moved to safe houses, and that's the reason the leaflets were dropped.
Well, it's also a good political move. I mean, it looks good. You know, like they're trying to resolve this peacefully. But you're absolutely right. The leaflets are going to spook people into moving precipitously, and the Russian drones are overhead. That's how they know that ISIS is hiding out in the mosques and hiding their weapons in the mosques.
Yeah, this game is over. Like the U.S. and Britain and Turkey, they're not going to do even though, I mean, Turkey ain't going to shoot down a Russian plane. It's all just hot air.
Certainly from the geopolitical sense, this is over. Putin trapped the United States in its own propaganda that we were going into Syria to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and he's basically pushed them back. And right now the U.S. government is burning the midnight oil, trying to figure out some way they can regain the propaganda initiative, even if they can't get the military initiative back. They're in serious, serious trouble. And it looks like the U.S. government is once again calling on Saudi Arabia to act as their proxy so they can say, we had nothing to do with this, because apparently all of a sudden, like a switch was thrown, a lot of the Saudi Arabian Muslim clerics are calling on Arab and Muslim countries to support the U.S. against Syria's government and its Iranian and Russian backers. And that's going to be a little bit of a tough sell, because these Muslim clerics are trying to tell Muslims to side with non-Muslims against their fellow Muslims, and I don't think they're going to get a lot of traction with that.
Do you have any orange jumpsuits left for the Muslim cleric?
I'm running out. I'm running out of those things here. But we'll just, we'll go over to the CIA Torture Center and get another whole case of them, I think.
I would love to be a fly in the room with the CIA. They're probably pulling their hair out trying to figure out a scheme on saving this, but at this point it's unsavable. I think they're just going to cut these people loose and let them get torn to shreds.
Well, what we can do is hopefully they've got one of those Israeli art students' paintings in their office, the one with all the metallic glitter on the front, because you can just beam a radio signal into that, catch the reflection, and hear everything going on in the room.
And Mike, I wanted to mention real quick, there's reports like 150,000 Russian troops being conscripted. That has nothing to do with, they're not going to put boots on the ground. They might have some special forces like the Spetsnaz, and they got the Free Syrian Army and their own intelligence assets. There's going to be no boots on the ground from Russian regular army forces.
Well,
Iran.
I'm not sure. I mean, they did call up the 150,000 reservists and put them on standby, and the Spetsnaz are definitely on the ground around Assad. But I think it's really going to come down to the fact that Russia isn't going to need to do a ground invasion of Syria. And I know it puts the lie to the old lesson of Vietnam that you can't win a ground war from the air. But in Vietnam, the U.S. was trying to fight the people who actually lived there, and Russia is targeting people who don't actually live in Syria and call it home. They're paid to be there, and so it's a vastly different dynamic.
It's just amazing how fast Russia has been able to pinpoint these targets, and the U.S. is obviously not, because they're behind this whole shenanigans.
Of course they are,
and Britain, NATO. They're all in the same game. They're not no different. The same little empire group.
Well, NATO's involved because Europe's economy is hopelessly entangled with the U.S. dollar. And when the U.S. collapses, there's going to be no way that Europe can avoid being dragged down with it. That's the downside of globalism right there. NATO is on board this war agenda, but the people of Europe most assuredly are not, because they know if the U.S. gets a world war going with Russia, it's going to be fought in their front yards, and landscaping is expensive. And so you're seeing the people of Europe want this all to go away. You're starting to see the governments of some of these countries, like France and Germany, pull away from this anti-Russia agenda and align with Russia, saying, yeah, the problem is ISIS and Al-Qaeda, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, meaning the problem is covert U.S. overthrows. Let's stamp that down, and the problem will be gone.
It's going to be, if they want nuclear, it'd be in everybody's yard. Everybody's
yeah, unfortunately. I got a first strike target right out this window here that makes it hard for me to sleep at night. All right, well, anything else, Dustin?
Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Now, the upper house speaker in the Russian parliament, Valentina Matviyenko, is basically saying that Russia will seriously consider any requests by Iraq for airstrikes against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So this is a growing trend. Everybody understands Al-Qaeda and ISIS were manufactured bad guys created by U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies to justify this war on terror as a cover for wars of conquest. And everybody knows it, and nobody feels like they have to go along with the cover story out of politeness any longer. Now, as John in Barbados mentioned, Afghanistan is now asking Russia to come on in and help them combat terrorism. And whether they mean the Taliban or something else that's causing problems, we're not sure. Now, getting on back up to that horrible tragedy in Afghanistan, where the hospital was bombed in Kunduz, somehow the United States has managed to persuade the United Nations not to have an investigation. The UN says, we trust the United States will get to the bottom of this, and we don't need to get involved. We're just going to wait until we get the official investigation from the United States and NATO. Meaning it's a cover-up here. And the UN, of course, is being completely bogus here because the United States has changed their story 4 times in 4 days regarding what happened. Oh, the Taliban were shooting from the hospital. No, there were no dead combatants found in the wreckage here. Oh, well, it was the fault of the Afghanis. We were listening to them directing this thing. And today, of course, they're saying it was a mistake. It was hit by accident. And when they keep on changing the story like that, pretty soon everybody just says, I'm not going to believe anything you're saying. Right after you bombed it, you said you had to bomb it because, there were combatants there shooting out of the hospital. And now you're saying, oh, it was just an accident. And again, the White House official position on the Doctors Without Borders hospital is it's collateral damage. It's not a war crime. It was an accident. You can't hold us to account for an accident. I can just see some drunk driver going before a judge and saying, it was an accident. I plowed into that line of nuns on the sidewalk. You're not going to get much traction with that one here. Now, Glenn Greenwald has come out with an interesting article pointing out that while the world media and the independent media are talking about the fact the United States bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital, he points out how the reports from CNN and the New York Times don't mention the U.S. They merely say airstrikes hit a hospital. That's it. They don't say whose airstrike. They just sort of let it go and hope that people won't be asking. And the idea is to try and obfuscate who carried it out and say, well, there was an airstrike and we're not really sure who did it. And this kind of disconnect is what happens when your propaganda is being planned for you by advertising agencies and public relations firms who don't think longer than 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or maybe a 4 or 5 week sales campaign. There's no continuity, no self-consistency. It's eating itself as we watch. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. When we went to the commercial break, we were talking about what has gone wrong with the U.S. propaganda campaign. And we've commented on this before, that for propaganda to work, it must present a believable, consistent, alternative reality, which replaces the true reality. And they failed miserably in the United States because the propaganda is being designed by ad agencies and public relations firms that institutionally do not think in terms of long-term continuity. And that's why the propaganda is all over the place. It lacks a clear narrative. And speaking of the propaganda breaking down, we've been talking about the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which is the go-to source for quotes by the corporate media as to, how bad Assad is and how much the Syrian people want us to come on in and save them. And as we pointed out yesterday, this Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is a one-man operation. It's operated out of a 2-bedroom house in Coventry, England. Now, Russia Today went and interviewed this guy who's supposed to be the source of what's going on in Syria and got him to admit on air he has not actually been in Syria for the last 15 years. Hasn't been there at all. Last time he was in Syria was 15 years ago. And this guy is considered the authoritative source by the U.S. corporate media as to what's going on in Syria, at least as far as what they want you to think is going on in Syria. How many more times do you have to be lied to before you realize that's all the government's capable of? Remember when they claimed Ahmadinejad was saying he wanted to wipe Israel off the map, and people who actually spoke the language said no. It was mistranslated deliberately by MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, which is a known Israeli propaganda front, just like Site Intelligence Group and all these others. Now, up in Ukraine, Kiev has violated, again, the ceasefire 3 times over the past 24 hours. Apparently, the Donetsk airport came under fire from 82mm and 120mm mortars, which are not supposed to be anywhere around there underneath the Minsk agreements. Now, Ukraine, actually Poroshenko, is having some serious problems because the latest head count of desertions among the Kiev forces now totals 16,000. Since Poroshenko ordered the Ukrainians to attack and kill the other Ukrainians, 16,000 troops have deserted. Many have gone over to the eastern Ukrainian republics, taking their equipment with them. Now, possibly in response to this, Ukraine's parliament has just legalized the use of foreign mercenaries in Ukraine's military forces. which means probably a lot of these ISIS that are running out of Syria are going to show up in Ukraine now. You know, give me a paycheck, tell me which way to point the gun. And of course, the U.S. is now sending more, supposedly defensive weapons to Kiev. More of your tax dollars at work trying to overthrow the world here. Now, as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu and AIPAC and the Israel lobby in general suffered a humiliating political defeat. They bet their reputation on killing the Iran deal in the U.S. Congress, and they failed. It was a huge fight. And not only did they fail to do it, they put themselves on public display so that Americans were waking up and saying, what the heck is going on here? That Congress is supposed to represent the American people, not a foreign government. That's why Netanyahu is back in Tel Aviv right now dropping bombs on the Gazans to make himself feel better. But apparently, over in Israel, there's this rabbi, Botich, who knows who's really to blame, and he's out there saying that Jews in the United States didn't do enough to protect Israel. If American Jews had pushed harder, the Iran deal would not have passed. So Israel is now blaming all of the American Jews for AIPAC and Netanyahu's failure to subvert the U.S. Congress. Now, it may just be that American Jews realize they're American Jews and not slaves of Israel living in foreign nations they're under some obligation to subvert. And support by American Jews for Israel's policy has been falling rapidly. And maybe, just maybe, all Jews everywhere have come to understand that it is the actions of the government of Israel and not anti-Semitism that poses the greatest danger to their continued safety and prosperity. No, it's all of you. You didn't help us enough. It's all your fault. Now, let's talk about the economy. As you know, there is a huge debate going on in the Congress about raising the debt ceiling. Obama's out there saying we have to raise the debt ceiling to preserve the full faith and credit of the United States, which doesn't actually make a lot of sense. That's like saying you've maxed out all your credit cards and you're going to preserve your good credit by applying for another credit card, which is easy to do when you have your own money printing press. But analysts are saying that every time the U.S. debt ceiling gets raised again, it makes stable currencies like China's renminbi, the yuan, and the ruble look better. And so we have the U.S. inflating away the value of the U.S. dollar at the same time they're aiming guns at anybody who wants to change currencies. That's not a policy that can persist very long. And I'd like to remind everybody that the question all of you Americans should be asking is not whether or not to raise the debt ceiling. The question you should be asking of yourselves, of your friends, your family, your coworkers, is why the federal government, which is authorized by the Constitution to create and issue interest-free money, persists in borrowing that money at interest from a privately owned central bank, plunging future generations of Americans into hopeless debt slavery to those private central bankers. That is the real question Americans should be asking. That is the question the U.S. government, the Federal Reserve, and the corporate media are hoping to distract you from. Oh, look, there's been another school shooting. Pay no attention to the money junkies. Now, right now, the 500 largest American companies are holding more than $2.1 trillion in accumulated profits offshore in order to avoid U.S. taxes. If that money was taxable under U.S. law, that would be $620 billion in U.S. taxes. But we're not going to ignore the corporations by taxing them on their money. Well, we're going to raise taxes on the workers and the middle class because that's what they're here for. We can't tax the rich just because they have it. We're going to go on taxing the poor who don't have it to pay in the first place. And then they wonder why there is no economic recovery. Now, the world's largest sovereign wealth fund is having to start liquidating their assets. The IIF, and this follows hard on the heels of announcements that Saudi Arabia has had their cash position so harmed by this aborted oil price war with Russia. Is starting to dump their assets as well. All right, we're going to grab one quick phone call here before the news. I don't have a name or a location, but who are you? And
man. Hello, with Errol from the Netherlands.
Oh, yes. How are you? How you doing?
It is so weird. There are so many disconnections that I have.
I saw that on the Comrex. Your call kept getting dropped. You know, are we being interfered with, or is it just the decaying state of the American phone system?
Well, I don't know. You are in Hawaii.
Well, I'm in Hawaii, but the control room is in the continental United States.
Yeah, okay, but it was just weird. Anyways, aloha.
Aloha, and I hate to tell you this, but we've run out of time on this segment. We have to take about an 8-minute break for news and commercials. Do you want to try and call back after that? And I'll take your call and I'm sorry, the clock ran out. I feel really bad about it.
I will wait.
All right, we'll talk to you.
No
you will wait. All right, I'm going to put you back on hold. We'll be back after the news and commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And it seems our caller from the Netherlands is still having problems maintaining a good, solid connection. So we're going to grab another phone call here from Wally in Texas. Wally, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. It is a toss-up with me whether I would rather Donald Trump win the presidency or Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, give Putin an air base in Texas. I can't quite decide, Michael, which would be the best.
Boy, that is a tough one. That's a tough one here. I mean, it's a shame Putin can't throw his hat into the ring here in the United States. I think a lot of people would vote for him.
The only way that I'll start feeling proud to be an American again is if Trump wins. It's very depressing. But they are getting out of Putin's way, and I got respect for the guy, and they do too, if they want to admit it or not. I mean, he just didn't learn how to play chess.
He's a master. He's absolutely a master. He's a statesman, and everybody understands that, and that's why Obama is out there saying, how can they have more respect for Putin than for me? I am the President of the United States. Well, the United States isn't what it used to be, and neither is the office of the presidency. Okay, listen, Wally, I hate to cut you off, but it looks like we got our caller back from the Netherlands, and so, aloha, are you there?
Yeah.
There you are. Good. All right.
Finally.
Talk fast. We don't know how long this line is going to stay hooked up.
It was very weird. I can say to you, I heard about only commercials. I don't know what happened, but I only heard commercials. So I thought by myself, no, this is not correct. So hanged up, called again, hanged up, called again, hanged up, called again, and now I am in.
Well, you need to understand, at the top of the hour of our show, we have commercials and news break that run for about 7-8 minutes, and that's our big break during the hour.
I know.
And our control room operator...
I listen a lot to your radio show,
well,
so I know exactly the timing.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about?
I just want to say to you, I hacked something today. What I did... when you want to have a YouTube account or a Gmail account, well, you need to put in your telephone number. So what did I do? I just I was going to the gas station, and there you have free SIM cards. You know a SIM card?
Yes, I know what a SIM card is.
You can put it in your telephone. So I was typing that number in Google, and I had a free SIM card, so I was like, okay, I can receive.
Whoop, we just lost the call again. All right, well, maybe that free SIM card wasn't all that good. All righty, now then, getting back to the economy. Over in Great Britain, Boris Johnson has come out with this statement where he is calling the anti-austerity protesters, quote, a mob of assorted crusties with nose rings. And when they're using that kind of rhetoric, it's basically a flashing neon sign that they know they've lost the debate and they've lost the cover-up, that the people understand austerity is not good for the people or the nation. Austerity is simply taking more away from the people to give to the money junkies. Austerity is fascism. And by the way, quick little clarification. When you, of your own free will, adopt a simpler lifestyle, that's austerity. When the government comes in and says, you must live more simply so we can give your money to the bankers, that's tyranny. They call it austerity, but it isn't. It's a complete mislabel. Now then, as you know, the people negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership have reached an agreement. Now, TPP is not the law of the land. It has to be ratified by all the various countries involved with it, and it is facing an uphill fight here in the U.S. Congress. Here is what is really interesting. According to this article over on Fortress Blogspot, basically Obama came out and said the goal of the Trans-Pacific Partnership is that America should write the rules of the global economy. Well, that may have been true back in the days of Bretton Woods. That may have been true right up to the moment when Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility of the U.S. Federal Reserve note. But I think the rest of the world, looking at how badly the U.S. government and Wall Street have managed the U.S. economy, and are saying, no, we're not going to let you call the shots for us because you're incompetent. But that's what the TPP and the TTIP are really all about. Setting into treaty continued U.S. hegemony over the world's economy. That's it. That's the plan. No matter how much they devalue and debauch the U.S. dollar, these other nations will be required to go on using it, trading with it, under the treaty obligation. Back when they were starting this whole debate, I said this is an attempt to set by treaty a continuance of the Bretton Woods policies. And I'm hoping that these other nations are basically going to shut this whole thing down, because it's not good for them. And with the U.S. military obviously proven to be inferior in Syria, I think a lot of these countries are going to stand up and say, we've thought about this and this really isn't a good deal. Not for us. Over in Luxembourg, they're setting up a financial system that will trade in rubles. The world is fleeing the U.S. dollar, and the reason for that is very simple. The U.S. government and the Federal Reserve and Wall Street are destroying the dollar out of sheer greed. TARP, bailouts, quantitative easing, basically it's turned into a legalized counterfeiting operation. They're just printing up and creating all the money they need to go on pretending there's a working economy in this country. And there isn't. And they're basically lying to you to convince you that there is. And a good illustration of that comes out of this article over in NewsForge. The unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate is falling. Unemployment is down. And yet, the number of Americans who can't find jobs is continuing to go up. Now, obviously, there's a major disconnect there. We can't have 5% unemployment with 94 million Americans willing and able to work who cannot find a job. Of course, the Federal Reserve has a reason for that. The Federal Reserve says, they don't want to work. They're just late. They don't want to find a job. There's plenty of jobs out there, emptying trash and, cleaning out the gutters and working in the fast food restaurants, at least until the robots take over. But the economy is woefully out of balance. You can't have all the money piled up on the very, very top. There aren't enough money junkies there to go around all the shopping malls and buy up all the consumer goods needed to keep the system running. Right now in this country, most Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. 20% of Americans don't have a savings account. And we hear about all this talk about negative interest to get people to empty their savings account and put the money into circulation. What a reversal from when I was a kid, where everybody was encouraged, you've got to have a savings account. Put as much money in the bank as you can. But that was back when the banks needed your deposits to lend back out. Now they don't have to. They just create it out of thin air. Create it out of thin air. All right, I'm going to see if, actually, we're coming up on another commercial break here. Pardon me. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about Hillary Clinton. She's still in the news. And we'll be right back after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to try and get Elmo from the Netherlands one more time, so talk fast before we lose this connection.
Well, it's amazing that I'm still on, but I forgot what I wanted to say. I just want to say to all people in the world, get off the drinking, because these times now are the greatest times, and this is history that is now becoming reality. We are seeing a new era, a new age in how do you call that?
Well, it's on the horizon. It's not here yet, but we can see it on the horizon. It's on the horizon. Okay?
Yes. So I must say, all people that are drinking or on alcohol or on other drugs, this time, get off it. This is the best time. They call it the end game. I don't call it the end game. This is a new game. This is a beginning for all the people in the world to come together, reach out to each other, and make things happen.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
For real.
You remind me, you remember the opening of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I often feel that way. Anyway, I'm going to let you go because the phone line's going to drop anyway. Thank you for the phone call, and we got to get back to some of the news here. Now, on to Hillary. Hillary is out there saying, I'm the most transparent person in American history. Well, there's another way to look at that. She's trying to say, see, you know everything there is about me. Obviously not. But you know, if you're totally transparent, you're invisible. Can't see anything about them. And that may be the context for her to make that rather ridiculous statement. Now, as you heard on the news break, the State Department has basically ordered former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to search for more emails, basically saying the evidence they have now is that Hillary has not turned over all of her government documents back to the possession of the government, which means Hillary has committed perjury before the U.S. Congress. Book 'em, Dano. Now, the other scandal that's coming out with the emails is that, in point of fact, as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton maintained very close communications with the major donors to the Clinton Foundation. That's called conflict of interest. That's called corruption, is what that's called. And apparently, George Soros was just sending her emails saying, we've got to deal with Albania, we've got to deal with this, and Hillary would turn around and tell the State Department, we've got to deal with Albania, and we've got to deal with this. And so we're basically seeing donors to the Clinton Foundation gained high-level access to the policy-making machine of the United States government. And the big question that is still being totally ignored by the corporate media, by the Congress, by the Justice Department, by the FBI, was Hillary Clinton using her private weak server and the Clinton Foundation in a repeat of the Clintons' 1996 Chinagate Secrets for Cash scandal. Nobody even wants to talk about that outside the independent media, apparently. Now, Hillary Clinton has launched her first national TV ad, and she's playing the victim card. It's the vast right-wing conspiracy. They're out to wreck my candidacy. They wouldn't even care about the email server and all the dead bodies and all the drugs and everything if they weren't out to get me. So she's out there whining and playing victim, and I don't think that's a quality that we want to see in a president anyway. We don't want a president who plays victim. We want a president who takes responsibility for what they have done. We're definitely not getting that with Hillary. Now, we are getting word that Hillary Clinton's campaign has launched opposition research on Joe Biden. Hillary is terrified he will step in. And there's a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to step in because while Hillary is still leading the Democratic pack in the polls, she is hopelessly unable to get up on any of the GOP candidates. And all the polls saying, would you vote for this GOP candidate or Hillary Clinton, the GOP candidates overwhelmingly are winning. And so Joe Biden is being pressured to step on in. He has the advantage of being the incumbent vice president. And yeah, a lot of Hillary's support have already said when Joe steps in, the checks start flowing his way and not Hillary's way. And Hillary is trying to find some dirt on Joe to keep him from stepping on in there. Dirty playing. Now, Hillary is jumping on the gun grabber bandwagon as a political issue. Forget about that email server thing. Forget about all those dead people in Benghazi. You want me to fight for gun control. And she's already out there announcing she's going to sign executive orders for gun control if she's elected president. Well, you need to remember, presidential executive orders are legally binding only on the executive branch of the government. You, as ordinary American citizens, are not under any obligation to obey a presidential executive order. That's not what the executive order is supposed to be doing. Now, we've had a rash of presidents who think it is, but it isn't. A presidential executive order is the instruction from the president to the executive branch to carry out the will of the Congress, which in turn is supposed to be carrying out the will of the people. A couple of wrinkles in the system, but that's the way it's supposed to work. Now, Hillary Clinton is out there saying, we have to hold the gun manufacturers liable for the crimes committed with their weapons here. And so, obviously, the next step is we're going to sue the knife companies for stabbings, spoon companies for the obesity epidemic, and so forth and so on here. And they want to sue the gun manufacturers for the crimes committed when their product is used in an illegal manner. But the pharmaceutical industry that made the drugs that drove these mass shooters crazy are protected by law. Same thing with the vaccines. If the vaccines the government is now ordering you to take permanently cripple you, you cannot sue the vaccine makers. But by golly, we're going to get those gun makers. By the way, up in Chicago, the model for U.S. gun control has had their deadliest September in 13 years. Gun control does not stop crime and violence. An armed citizenry stops crime and violence. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're in the middle of politics, campaigns, and the gun grabbers. They are out there on full rock and roll, full tilt boogie, afterburner overdrive, out there saying, we've got to get rid of the Second Amendment. We've got to get rid of the guns here. Now, when somebody takes a car and runs it up on the sidewalk and plows into a bunch of pedestrians, they don't take cars away from the good drivers, do they? We know that hundreds of thousands of Americans die every year from medical mistakes. There have been a couple of cases of doctors caught deliberately killing patients they just didn't like. But we're not going to take doctors and hospitals away from everybody, are we? Only in the case of the guns are we all being told we have to disarm ourselves because of the actions of a few people doped up on these prescription antidepressants. Now, apparently Barack Obama, who has openly gone out and said it's okay to politicize these shootings like happened in Oregon, is out there saying that he is preparing executive orders for gun control. And again, executive orders are binding on the executive branch of the government only. Citizens are under no obligation to comply whatsoever. Now, Obama cannot use an executive order to bypass the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Under the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Marbury v. Madison, any such order or law that is repugnant to the Constitution is automatically null and void. You can ignore it. Now, under the U.S. Supreme Court ruling United States v. Miller, the Second Amendment reserves to the people arms equivalent to those carried by the uniformed forces. Because the Second Amendment is not about shooting targets or hunting. It's about giving the government a reason not to interfere with the people. And under the U.S. Supreme Court ruling John Baddelk versus the United States, citizens have a right to resist any official acting outside the law and the Constitution, up to and including the use of lethal force. Now, Obama is out there with a statement that countries with no guns are much safer than the United States. That's not true. And by way of example, Honduras, population 8.2 million, bans citizens from owning guns completely, outright, has the highest homicide rate in the entire world. Contrast that with Switzerland, also a population of 8.2 million, that requires citizens to own guns and has the lowest homicide rate in the entire world. We used to run a public service announcement that was talking about this Kennesaw, Georgia, that passed a city ordinance ordering every household to have a firearm on the premises, and their crime rate plummeted. Plummeted. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a couple of phone calls here. James in the Virgin Islands, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. How are you doing, Michael?
I am doing fine. How's the weather down there in the Virgin Islands?
Oh, man, perfect, man. You need to just show up one day with your swimming trunk and your sunglasses.
Well, I'm here in Hawaii, so, I got my swimming trunks and sunglasses good to go as soon as the radio show is over.
Well, just come on down. Look what I want to show you this here. This one I want to show you. You see those commercials where you'll be playing on your radio?
Yes.
These things just go really far. One day I say, man, I'm going to call this one company that you'll be advertising their name, Body and Soul.
Yes.
Because my friends, they're taking too much of these Viagra's and they're killing them. So I say, this is a good thing. So I call the guy up,
Mm-hmm.
A really nice guy. He answered the phone. I say, man, I want to buy some of those Body and Soul thing. How you sell them by the month or whatever. He say, you can get what you want. I say, okay, well, only one problem. I live in the Virgin Islands. So I'm like, he said, man, that's where I have most of my customers.
Okay.
So I just think that to make the point that these things, what you'll be doing in terms of those advertisements, those go a far away. So when you finish work today, you go down to the head office and pick up that royalty check. It should be at least $400,000.
I don't get royalties and residuals from the radio show commercials. I don't get anything, actually, financial from any of that stuff. And I have nothing to say about the commercials. That is entirely decided by GCN. But we always welcome new advertisers. We always welcome new advertisers so that we can pay our overworked tech control people, the money that they richly deserve.
Yes, but I think if you just get on there, I think out of your good heart, they might just give you something. But now, the next thing I want to talk about is with over there in Syria. What, the point one I'm checking out here with this thing here is that the problem is this. There are Sunnis and there are Shiites. These Sunnis and these Shiites had a lot of problems that go way back, So that way is still there. And if you look at most of those countries that's creating a problem like Saudi Arabia, Sunni. And then you have the other Shiites, which would be like Iran, Syria, and a few of those countries. So that line is still there. Now you're seeing the clerics and stuff in Iran are saying, well, let's go to war, not with Iran, in Saudi Arabia, let's go to war with Iran and Syria and all those things. So, that's how I'm seeing it. And because of this rift, the West is always able to come in and use a divide and conquer theory and kind of have...
Very much so. And what's really ironic about all of this is all of these religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, which is split into Sunni and Shiite, they all go back to the same source, Abraham. And somebody says we want to break off because we want to do our own church here and we're going to do the Protestants and Reformation. And it's all about control over the revenue. And yes, religion is used as the excuse for war. It's used to sell the war to people. But the wars are really ultimately about power, money, and control.
Yeah, that's the end product.
Okay.
So, okay, well, I'm going to be listening, man, and you take good care of yourself and your family, okay? And you take care.
I certainly will. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in Texas. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, if Obama drives it, time the states make a stand, and the governors and the sheriff, because the sheriff is the only elected really law enforcement officer in the country, period. Should make it clear that any federal agents come into these states are forbidden to come into these states. They do come in, they will be arrested. The states have to make a stand, even when it comes down to saying, you know what, there's no way we're going to use force to keep you out. Plain and simple. And that means forming militias, forming posses, doing whatever it is, and making it clear, you feds do not come into this state to enforce unlawful laws. That would even go if Congress passed something like this. But this is not even passed by Congress. This is Obama doing this on his own. So if the Congress doesn't stop him by impeaching him or doing something, then I think that's the best thing that the states could do. As a matter of fact, it's their obligation. I don't expect states like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Connecticut, by the way, which is still, talk about Sandy Hook, something that never even happened to Sandy Hook.
Yes.
All these states, I don't expect them to do anything. But states like this, like Texas, or the other state I stay in quite a bit, North Carolina, the Dakotas, basically most of the West and most of the South. This is the time to make a stand and say no.
Well, it's a very simple situation. When you have a state government that's abusing its own people, they're anti-gun. When you have a state government that knows they have the support and trust of the people of that state, generally they're very cool with liberal gun laws and gun ownership. And it's basically abusive government fears an armed populace. The reason the Founding Fathers gave us a right to keep and bear arms was to hold abusive government in check. And unfortunately, government is in a position where they have to not only go on abusing us, but abuse us even more to keep up those payments to that private central bank. This mess is all the fault of the federal government, forgetting that they're supposed to work for we the people. Mark, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line I'm going to get to as soon as we're back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right to the phones and talk to Audrey in Oklahoma. Aloha, Audrey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I was at the grocery store and was looking at what, the magazines and stuff they have as you're checking out, and they had Hillary Clinton has 6 months to live, and indicates, of course,
are those the same newspapers that insist Bill Clinton met with the space aliens and the frog boy is out on the loose again and that other stuff? I mean, those tabloid newspapers at the supermarket checkout stands, they're there to attract attention and sell paper. Now, there has been a question raised about a possible head injury that Hillary suffered a while back. But again, the way the system is supposed to work is when either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party are approached by somebody who's a serious candidate, they demand a medical checkup to basically, they don't want to put somebody in office who's going to go wacko or just fall over dead. Now, obviously, everybody knew about John F. Kennedy's back injury, but that was not considered something that was going to limit his ability to do his job. So I don't know. I tend not to give that a lot of credence.
Okay. Well, it just goes on and on about that she has a brain tumor and blood clots and MS, and she's an alcoholic. So anyway.
Well, I'd go with the alcoholic part. I mean, that's a matter. I mean, that's been known all along. And who knows? Frankly, there's been some faulty thinking on her part. But I'd rather stay focused on this idea about the email server and the foundation possibly being a spy operation, U.S. secrets in exchange for donations, because if you start going into unsubstantiated claims of Hillary's medical condition, it allows her to play the victim card yet again.
And that may be the reason why it's even there in the first place.
Could very well be.
So I thought I'd share, and that's it.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, getting on back to gun control. There is more and more information coming out about this Chris Mercer, who shot up this community college in Oregon. And as you probably remember from yesterday, the corporate media modified his picture to make him look whiter than he really was, thinned out his lips. I mean, that's not just a case of twiddling with the gamma on the image. They literally photoshopped him to make him look more white because they were pushing the idea that he was a white supremacist. They're just making up all these legends about him, trying to sell what's going on. Now, the revelation has come out. This guy was all over local chat rooms in Roseburg, and he went by the name Lithium Love, which lithium is a prescription psychiatric medication, a very strong one actually. And apparently his comments had all these references to prescription psychiatric medication. And apparently in one of his Facebook posts, he said he was basically on 4 or 5 medications at the same time. He's got a pill bottle with 5 types of pills. Didn't know what he was supposed to take, so he just grabbed 4 at random and take them. There is a serious problem with prescription psychiatric medications triggering mass violence and suicide, and we did repost to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com our resource page, because this is not a gun problem. This is a pharmaceutical industry problem that is making huge amounts of money selling these medications, usually to people who don't really need them and can be harmed by them. Remember, the guy who came up with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is used to push pills at kids in school, admitted before he passed away it was completely made-up fictitious condition. It exists only to give pill pushers a reason to sell more pills. Now, have you noticed how after every act of terror, we are told we should not judge all Muslims on the actions of a few, and this is valid? Why can't gun owners get the same deal? Why is it different for us? Every time there's one guy pilled out of his mind, goes on a shooting rampage, oh, all the gun owners are equally guilty. All the gun manufacturers have to be sued. We have to erase guns from blah, 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 blah. Now, up in Oregon, the head of the investigation into what happened at the community college is in the hands of Sheriff John Hanlon. He is now under attack by the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence because he is a staunch pro-gun supporter who does not think that we have had the true story about what happened at Sandy Hook. And so we're in a situation right now where the Brady campaign is saying we only want people who are anti-gun to investigate shootings. We only want people we have successfully bamboozled, investigating our latest bamboozles. So they're really have their knickers in a twist over that one. Now, Obama, again, cashing in, politicizing this horrible tragedy, and he said right on air, it's okay for me to politicize it. You know, to wave the bloody shirt, to stand on the dead bodies and make speeches. He has just announced he's going to go to Oregon, to the site of the massacre, so that he can stand there and say, this horrible tragedy, we've got to ban guns. And apparently the citizens of Roseburg are not happy about it. And they're preparing counter-demonstrations and protests against him. They even have a Facebook page trying to build support. They want a huge crowd to show up and tell Obama, no, you do not use our tragedy to push your anti-gun agenda. Now, meanwhile, over in Carly Fiorina's camp, she's out there just pandering to the war hawks and the torture freaks and the rest of the war criminals, saying, yes, we have to waterboard people. We have to torture them. That's the only way we can get them to admit what they're doing. And again, that's really all torture is good for, to get a politically expedient confession. Torture doesn't actually get you actionable intelligence. Remember when the U.S. started its waterboarding and torture of all these people, and we were getting all this orange alert and red alert and terror is going to happen. And it was basically because they tortured some guy until he said, yes, we're going to blow up a school bus and hopefully we won't burn our lips on the exhaust pipe. And they would put out the alert and say, we have authoritative intelligence that there's a terror attack coming. No, they just tortured some guy into admitting it. But Carly is perfectly okay with this. Yes, waterboarding works, torture works. She's all hot and bothered to do it on anybody she can find, potentially including U.S. citizens accused of being potential terrorists, which, if you remember the guidelines put out by the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, happens to be most of us. People who read the Internet are considered potential terrorists. Christians are on the list. People who don't trust the corporate media. Meanwhile, of course, despite dire predictions of imminent decline by the corporate media, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are still out there leading their respective polls. And Bernie Sanders is coming on strong. He is a significant threat to Hillary Clinton. And all of the corporate media are wringing their hands and saying, this can't be. We predicted that Trump was going to fizzle. His lead was going to dissolve. He was just going to go away. And the same with Bernie Sanders, and it's not working out. And have you noticed every time the corporate media interviews Donald Trump, they always hit him with the question, under what circumstances would you drop out of the presidential race? I mean, does that not reveal a bias? They're trying to give him the Ron Paul treatment. And Trump isn't buying it. And Trump and Sanders are doing very well in the polls because Americans are sick and tired of politics as usual. They're sick and tired of the establishment candidates. They're sick and tired of the friends of Israel. They're sick and tired of the wars, the war hawks, and the constant pandering to Wall Street. This next election, unless it is massively stolen, which is obviously a very real concern, it's going to be the year of the Mavericks. There's going to be a huge anti-incumbency fever sweeping the entire Congress. And yes, there's no end of opportunists who are just as ready to sell out to Israel and Wall Street as anybody else lining up to take those seats. But it will be good to remind the Congress that their names on the office doors are written in dry erase marker, and we, the American people, hold the eraser. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Getting on back to the gun issue, there's an aspect people are not looking at. We're seeing the government wring their hands over all the victims of mass shootings. At the same time, they're trying to convince you that you don't need to know how many innocent Americans are wrongfully killed by the police forces of this country. And as it turns out, more innocent Americans are being murdered by the police than by all the mass shootings. Now, the FBI is out there officially saying we don't need to keep track of those numbers, but there are websites out there that basically search for the news stories as they occur, and they keep a head count, so to speak. And the numbers for 2014 are in. The police killed more Americans in 2014 than all of the U.S. mass shootings combined. So, 15-day waiting period before you're allowed to call a police officer. We must stop this madness. Alrighty, now then, getting on back to the campaign here. By the way, somebody just sent me some photos from a Hillary get-together in Florida. And they rented a huge venue, and they got a little tiny crowd, most of whom just sat texting on their phones, which indicates they were kind of bored with the whole thing. In other words, somebody said, you got to show up, fill the room for us. Donald Trump has come out saying that if he is elected president, the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails will continue. She's not off the hook just because she's out of the race. And that is a very valid point of view, especially with regarding the question I am asking. Was Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets delivered through that weak private email server, and accepting the payments as donations to her charity? That's a valid question. And nobody outside the independent media is asking it. They don't want to go near it. They don't want to touch it. I remember all these years ago when I stumbled over the evidence of a cover-up in the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, and I tried to take it to some friends I had in the network news departments. And they already knew Foster had been murdered. And they said, we can't touch that story. That's the third rail. We've been told if we touch that story, our careers are over. Same thing all over again. All right, let's see. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. John in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good evening or good afternoon, Mike. I'm calling regarding a letter I just received today from the United States District Court from the Southern District of Florida regarding Tom's of Maine toothpaste. I'm not sure if you're aware. I always bought them because they labeled it, they labeled it as natural and then labeled it as fluoride-free. And mainly I bought it because it was fluoride-free. I don't really care what natural is about, although apparently this lawsuit is about a settlement that they don't want to take to court, so they want to do a settlement wherein from, where do they have it here, from March 25th, 2009 through September 23rd, 2015, they're going to reimburse people who purchased their product $28.
Okay.
And then, of course,
so it sounds like it's a class action settlement, and yeah, that's a valid thing to do. I mean, we have a serious problem where corporations in the United States of America, if they think they can get away with it, they will deliberately mislabel products. And we know that the USDA's certified organic program has become compromised by corporate lobbyists. That little emblem doesn't actually mean organic anymore. It means mostly kind of sort of organic. Doesn't have quite as much of the chemicals or GMO as the others. But it's all being compromised here. And yeah, anytime a company is caught mislabeling a product, and you find that there's something in there that the label says wasn't there, yeah, there should be a class action lawsuit. The government is obviously not going to hold these companies to account. It's up to citizens and public action lawyers to draw the line that you will be honest.
I'm curious of how you've been bringing up about the whole Congress going on about the labeling. You know, you can't say that it is GMO free. You know, so these guys are claiming they were natural. So they're settling.
Okay, now there's a qualifier there. The bill that has passed the House and is on its way to the Senate would outlaw any requirement to put a label on a product saying contains GMO. This law does not prohibit anybody from putting out a product that has a label saying we are GMO free. I'm sure they're going to try and find some way to deal with that, but there's really no legal justification to ban somebody from saying my product contains no GMO, as long as it genuinely does not contain GMO. Getting hard to find out, and that's why the GMO Project is doing such good work.
Okay, last word, just if I can.
Yeah.
Right on your note right there, then that means they can still say, I am GMO free or I am natural, and yet you're not, until a class action lawsuit comes down and...
Well, if they're saying we're GMO free and they're not GMO free, and if they say we're all natural and they're not natural, then yeah, they should be sued. And they should be driven out of business, because if corporations are legal persons, then we need a death penalty for corporations that misbehave.
I agree. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All righty. Now then, interesting little story has come out, and apparently it involves a young lady who is an activist working at a migrant camp, a refugee camp on the France-Italy border, and she was gang raped by Sudanese migrants repeatedly. And apparently she stayed silent about it because she was pressured by the activist group she's part of, saying it would damage the cause. These people in this activist group told this rape victim to stay silent because reporting the crime would set back their struggle for a, and this is a direct quote, a borderless world. This is a confirmation that this rush to flood the United States with Mexicans and Central Americans and Syrians and all the rest, and the same thing with Europe, is all about destroying our sense of national identity so that they can say there's a one world government and no borders. And I am opposed to that for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, as the global economic crisis should make clear, borders serve the same function for planet Earth that fireproof doors do for buildings and watertight hatches do for ships. They contain accidents. When you have the fireproof doors, a fire in an office only destroys the office. If you have watertight hatches, a leak in one part of the ship remains confined to that section. If you open up those fireproof doors, block them open, block open the waterproof hatches, take down the borders, it may look like things are better because you can get around from place to place faster. But the first fire comes along, destroys the entire building, the first leak sinks the entire ship, and the first economic failure in any country brings the entire system crashing down. That's the first reason I'm opposed to a global government. The second reason I'm opposed to a global government is look at the character of the people who are attracted to positions of power in the governments we already have. If there is a global government and a new Hitler or a new Stalin or a new George Bush seize power, there's nobody left to stand up to them to say, you are behaving badly. And third, if there's a single global government, then all social evolution stops. Because all governments preserve the status quo. There'll be no experiments to find potentially better ways of organizing our society and our civilization. And that's why I'm opposed to global government. I think the earth is better served by 1,000 small individual nations taking care of their own, trading across the border. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about confirmation that all these refugees and immigrants and everything are part of a plan to destroy our sense of a national, regional, or cultural identity, to make it easier to drop the borders. They literally told this activist who was raped not to report it because it would set back the goal of a borderless world. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And not surprisingly, we are seeing reports even on the corporate media. The number of immigrants deported from the United States in the last 12 months is the lowest since Barack Obama took office, including criminal immigrants. People who are known criminals are being allowed to stay in this country to serve the goal of a borderless world and the New World Order. And people are picking up on this and they're starting to fight back. Angela Merkel got ridiculed by the German media, and we're talking corporate mainstream in Germany media, where they showed her dressed in Muslim clothing for their criticisms about allowing Muslims to flood into Germany. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, there's talk about a referendum whether Great Britain will fully merge with the EU and adopt the euro, or if Great Britain kind of wants to go their other way. And Prime Minister David Cameron was saying end of 2017 is when the referendum will happen. But apparently there's a great deal of pressure coming from business leaders in Great Britain to move that timetable up to next year and just get it settled one way or the other. Now, the problem is right now that the British people are not very happy with the idea of merging with the European Union because they're seeing very clearly how the European Union has wrecked life for the member nations. They're all dealing with austerity, hardship, financial oppression. Who would want to join that? That's the reason Ukraine didn't want to join the European Union, which led to the U.S. coup d'etat and the current quagmire up there. Now, as you know, we've had some serious problems here in the United States with flooding down in South Carolina. There's been a large amount of rain. And there's kind of this weird little propaganda thing going on. It's 1,000-year rain, blah, blah, blah. It's always raining somewhere. And heavy rain is something that is expected and should be taken into account in civic planning. The reason there's all this flood damage down in South Carolina is the flood control infrastructure has been, like the rest of the country, neglected. The storm drains are blocked with debris, have not been cleaned out, and you get back flooding. And that's basically what happened. Now, Russia, their emergencies ministry, is offering assistance to the U.S. to help deal with all the people in South Carolina who have been harmed by the flooding. And I'm expecting the U.S. government to say, absolutely not, we will not let you in. Those people in South Carolina, let them drown. I'd rather see South Carolina fall off into the Atlantic than accept any help from you in Russia. Cool people here. Meanwhile, the United States stands as the sole United Nations state refusing to ratify the Child Rights Convention. Now, this convention is supposed to set out a legal, binding UN framework for protecting children around the world, especially in areas of conflict. And for some reason, the United States doesn't want to ratify it. Which, when you look at all the children being killed by U.S. drone strikes and military actions, not to mention all the children killed by the U.S. ally Israel, you can understand why maybe they don't want to do that. Okay. Interesting little story coming out of ResistanceJournals.com. Remember when they had the shooting at the church in Charleston, South Carolina? Apparently they have found documentation. There was an active shooter drill taking place at the same time. Same area. Ooh, isn't that getting to be a repeating pattern? And remember, up at that community college in Oregon, they'd had a shooter drill at that school only the week before. So, now, the U.S. government is conducting active shooting drills at schools across America. Now, I remember when I was a kid and I was in school, and they would say, we're going to have a fire drill. When you hear the bell, go do this. Or we're going to have an earthquake drill. When you hear the bell, go do this. That's what a drill is, to teach you how to react when something happens. The shooter drills are different. There's no announcement ahead of time. The students don't know what's coming. Neither do the teachers. They just have a bunch of costumed actors with fake blood and blanks in their automatic weapons running through, scaring the heck out of everybody. They're trying to traumatize people. They're not teaching them how to deal with an active shooter. They're traumatizing them, to condition them to have a negative emotional reaction to the sight of a gun. It's brainwashing. It's like Pavlov and its dog. Ring a bell, the dog drools. Show a gun, the citizens wet themselves. That's what's going on. These exercises of running into a school with guns and fake blood and shooting up the place don't teach anybody how to deal with the situation. Stab them with a scissor. You can stab them with a scissor. That's what it's going to do. These are literally acts of terror committed against students in schools to traumatize them and condition them to hate the idea of guns. That's what they are. They serve no other purpose whatsoever. Now, Edward Snowden is apparently talking about possibly coming back home, serving a jail sentence. He's been in Moscow for all these years, and I guess he's getting homesick, which I can understand. But he's still putting out information, warning us all, that U.S. and British spies basically have an agenda to own your smartphone. And Edward Snowden was interviewed by BBC's Panorama that aired yesterday evening. And they said basically this goes way beyond simply eavesdropping on your phone conversations. They want the phones to be able to listen to the room without your knowledge and awareness, or take photos and videos remotely. Here in the United States of America, of course, all of that is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. For that matter, the Fifth Amendment. Now, we posted a flashback to WhatReallyHappened.com. Rivero challenges the NSA. And I put it up there to underscore the fact that all of these demands to have backdoors into your phones and computers and everything are being sold with the idea that it's going to help find the terrorists. And that is simply not true. Because over the course of a year, I wrote 6 encryption challenges, none of which were solved, proving real terrorists can evade the NSA. They just want to watch you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, Apple, soaring on the success of the iWatch. They had a good first month. It's kind of plateaued off. Have now filed a patent for a smart ring. And maybe they just wanted to have the patent to prevent other people from coming on board. But, I mean, the iWatch is already pushing the limits of what people can actually see and do. And now they want to have a smart ring to go with your smartwatch, to go with your smartphone. That, I think, satisfies the definition of decadence. And apparently it's just going to notify you of something that you need to look at your iWatch, even though the watch is just, 4 inches away. Or maybe it's for people like me who don't want to wear an iWatch and they want to have their ring. I don't know. I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and I'll tell you why. It isn't the high-tech gadget gizmo wizardry, because that's very attractive to a lot of people, including me. I love gadgets when they work. I love very clever devices. I'm intrigued by them. But you have to have a healthy economy where the consumers have the kind of money where they can just, take $200 or $300 and just say, yeah, I'm going to get myself an iWatch or an iRing or an iPimple. We don't have that economy. We've been living in a wartime economy for 12 years. They won't admit it. We are being plundered openly by Wall Street and the private central bankers. We just don't have it. We're keeping our cars longer. We can't, even at the amazing prices we're seeing in the car ads, nobody's got the money to buy newer cars. It's just not out here. And there seems to be an incredible sense of denial in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. They don't want to accept that the plundering of the American people has hit bottom. They're at the bottom of the barrel, and their claws are just coming back with wood splinters and not much else. They still want to believe there are vast pools of untapped wealth out there waiting for them. And if we're not buying their products and spending money, it's just because we're greedy and selfish. We actually got that from Janet Yellen. Was looking at the consumer spending numbers and just saying, well, those Americans, they're being greedy. They want to hold on to their money. They're greedier than Wall Street. We're willing to spend our money. They've got it to spend. But Americans aren't buying all the new gizmos, and they're not going into the shopping malls for the holiday shopping season. It's because they're hanging on to their money. How could they do that? We don't have anything to hang on to. And that is a reality that Washington, D.C. and Wall Street just don't want to face up to right now, because it means the end of the party, the end of the game. The bottom level of the pyramid is collapsing. And there's not a thing they can do to stop it until they're willing to change the fundamental nature of the U.S. economy and go back to the economic system the nation started with, where the government issues an interest-free currency, spends it into circulation to buy what the government wants. The currency flows through society, powering commerce without accruing interest, and is taxed back at the same amount to balance the books and close the cycle. That's an economy that works for the nation and for the people. But it doesn't work for the private central bankers, who are absolutely convinced that all the work product of every human being on earth ultimately should wind up in their pocket. And as long as you have that predatory Ponzi scheme banking system and a government that is complicit in the looting, there's going to be collapses. There's going to be hardship and poverty and starvation and inevitably wars. Remember, before the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war. And now we're into big mistake number 3. And unless we change the fundamental nature of national economics, there'll be big mistake number 4, and big mistake number 5, and big mistake number 6. You cannot have private central banking without major wars by governments desperate to conquer other people's wealth to make the payments on the public currency. Now, you may have already seen this out on the corporate media. Finally, British Petroleum has been called to account for the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil disaster. They are being fined a record $20.8 billion by the U.S. government to cover the damages caused by the disaster. Now, British Petroleum isn't going to pay all of that $20.8 billion, certainly not going to come out of the pockets of the executives. They'll let some employees go, but they'll take most of it off their taxes as a tax deduction. It's amazing. All right, let's talk a little bit about human-caused global warming, because the carbon Nazis are just cranking up a media event to convince us that, yes, you may see record snow and ice in front of your eyes, but trust us, overall, other places, it's hugely warm. And to show you how ridiculous this is getting, New York University professor Matthew Liao came out with a suggestion. We should start giving hormone treatments to small children to limit their growth, because little tiny people use less energy and produce less carbon than the big, tall, gigantic people. So that's their solution. They're going to turn us all into munchkins in the name of fighting human-caused global warming. We represent the lollipop. Never mind. Have to be my age to get that reference. Meanwhile, we're still hearing from top UN scientist Dr. Kevin Trenberth and 19 other scientists who have signed on to this program. They want anybody who doubts the most holy revealed dogma of human-caused global warming to be charged under the RICO laws, the Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organization Law. There's a bit of a problem with that. Before RICO charges can be brought against any of us who are questioning St. Al of the Gore, they have to show that somehow somebody was paying us for our opinions. And they're not going to find that around here. My opinions are not for sale to anybody at any price. My bank account shows it. But when they get out there trying to use the law to silence opposition, it tells you they know the lie has been caught. Truth needs no laws to support it. Truth is not afraid of re-examination or questioning. Throughout history, only lies and liars resort to the force of the courts to enforce adherence to dogma. Meanwhile, an article coming out of Wired in Great Britain reminding everybody that a single Icelandic volcano is putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere than all of Europe. We have the same thing down here on the Big Island. Kilauea has been in constant eruption for over 20 years. I don't see Al Gore up there with a giant cork and a hammer. He's just running around saying, oh, you've got to pay carbon taxes. You must give us your money. We will save the planet from you evil, icky-poo humans. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. Declare something a crisis out of thin air and then offer to sell you a solution in exchange for tax money and obedience. The wild elephants are coming. Give me your money and I'll... Well, there's no wild elephants within 5,000 miles. See, it works. Give me $5. It is absurd. Now, a couple of new developments on human-caused global warming. We're coming up on a commercial break, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today, we're talking about human-caused global warming because the carbon Nazis are ramping up the fear-mongering. The world is going to end if you don't give us your money and do what we tell you. And they're trying to basically head off the fact that we are headed into a new harsh winter with basically it's a rehash of something they said during the first harsh winter after they claimed snowfalls are a thing of the past. And by the way, the UK Independent has now yanked that article off their server. The one where it says from March 20th, 2000, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. It's been Orwellized. Doesn't matter. We all kept copies. Nice try. Not going to work. Now, yesterday we were reporting on the work done by Dr. David Evans. This guy has 6 degrees in mathematics and in applied mathematics, and he used to work as a climate modeler for the Australian government's Greenhouse Office. And he went back and he took a look at the basic climate model that has been used by all of these people screaming about human-caused global warming and carbon dioxide. And he found what he is politely terming errors. He found 2 errors, or 2 riggings, and the new corrected model finds that the climate sensitivity to carbon dioxide is a lot lower than Al Gore was claiming. And the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has overestimated future global warming by as much as 10 times. Now, were these simple mistakes? You would think in a fundamental climate model that everybody is referencing as the authoritative source, not that a computer model can actually prove anything. It's a simulation. But remember the ClimateGate scandal where somebody leaked out the emails and the actual computer source code from the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, and showed all these emails where they were talking about hiding the fact that temperature had gone into a decline after the 1990s. And the computer code showed rigging. You could actually look at the source code for the software that was giving them the hockey stick and just see where it said, after this year, start adding this much to the temperature every succeeding year. There's no scientific justification for that code to be there. It's a flat-out lie. Now, of course, we have the issue of the North Atlantic blob. They're calling it the blob because there's an area of the Atlantic Ocean south of Greenland which is unusually cold. And they're out there saying, well, this proves ocean currents have changed. Well, ocean currents change all the time. They change every year. When the sun traces out its analemma in the sky and the seasons change, ocean currents change, responding to, which side of the planet has summer and which side of the planet has winter. And they're already out there trying to revive the plot line from the movie The Day After Tomorrow, where global warming leads to an ice age by the collapse of the conveyor current. And the theory of the conveyor current had been discredited even before the movie hit the theaters, because it tries to treat like there are these tubes of water that travel through the ocean. And it doesn't. There's constant mixing going on. And there's the second law of thermodynamics. There's convection. So what is the blob doing there in the North Atlantic? Well, if we're heading into a new little ice age, it's got to show up somewhere first. And now we're seeing a report that's come out of Investment Watch blog, where scientists who are studying the Great Lakes are reporting that below the surface, the Great Lakes are much colder than they normally would be. It's going to be a brutal, brutal winter. Now then, we're still dealing with the aftermath of this huge scandal over Volkswagen cheating on its emissions tests. And it turns out the Environmental Protection Agency, years ago, 20 years ago, had a system to measure the emissions on cars while they were being driven. The system was known as Rover. And the EPA shut down the lab and dropped the entire device and went back to static testing, because as it turns out, all the car companies have been cheating on the emissions tests, including the American companies. And the EPA went along saying, we'll test using this method so you can get the numbers that will allow you to meet the requirements and sell cars. Now, it's turning out the British government knew Volkswagen was rigging their diesel emissions tests about a year ago. But it didn't become an issue until Germany abandoned the U.S. anti-Russia agenda and signed on with the Russians' anti-ISIS agenda. Then it's a big scandal and they get hit with a huge fine. And other car companies who were caught cheating on their emission scandal, wrist slap. Remember the GM ignition switch? That actually killed people. Wrist slap fine. VW rigging its diesel emissions, yes, it's tacky, it's illegal, it's dishonest. Nobody died from that. They get hit with a huge fine. They're being punished. Okay, now there's a story from Refreshing News 99. They're conducting surveys of religious belief among the American population, especially among the younger people, the millennials. And looking at the numbers of 11 million U.S. adolescents traced back over the last 50 years, researchers find, to nobody's surprise, the millennials are by far the least religious generation. Now, partly that has to do with improved science education up until Common Core showed up, has to do with all of the child sex abuse scandal that has hit virtually every major branch of religion, and the rise of the independent media, where these scandals, which formerly were concealed, because we can't harm the church, and they get on out there. So young people are breaking free of the chains of belief. And that's a good thing. That's a victory that I think everybody in the independent media can point to. Now, there's another story breaking, and let me get on back to this. This is coming out of Investors Business Daily, and it's talking about this instruction that Patrick Kennedy, the State Department's Undersecretary of State, called Clinton's lawyer, sent him a letter, saying she's got to provide more emails. And the way that he phrased it has attracted attention. He said, to the extent her emails might be found on any Internet service and email providers, we encourage you to contact them. And it's raised a question, and it's a legitimate question. Did Hillary have other private email accounts she was using for her various activities? We know of the two that she did have, HDR22 at ClintonEmail.com and HRod17 at ClintonEmail.com. Were there others out there? Because we know the reason Hillary had this private server was to have control over her communications. And we're not talking her private communications. We're talking about her work as Secretary of State, which by law has to be a public record, and the records have to be kept by the State Department. It's a valid question. And beyond that, of course, is the big, ugly question which nobody seems to want to touch outside the independent media. Was Hillary selling U.S. secrets through that weak email server and getting payments for them as donations to her charitable foundation? And it's not a blue sky question because of the 1996 Chinagate Secrets for Cash scandal. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Thanks to everybody who's called the local talk radio stations and pointed them at GCNlive.com. As you heard from that call from the Virgin Islands, we are getting on-air affiliates signing on to this program. So thanks to all the Rivero's Rangers who are out there helping to spread the word, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.